دع الأيام تفعل ما تشاء وطب نفسا إذا حكم القضاء ولا تجزع لحادثة الليالي فما لحوادث الدنيا بقاء وكن رجلا
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا محمد وآله وصحبه أجمعين. I welcome all of you to the first Q&A session, panel talk between me and our renowned scholar Dr. Yasir Qadhi. Alhamdulillah, today is going to be a little different. We're going to have quick questions where the Shaykh would answer very quickly, inshallah, trying to get as many questions as we can. Just FYI, me and Shaykh Yasir, we're sitting about 10 feet apart right now. Just so you know, just in case some people might ask, Dr. Yasir Qadhi, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I don't know whether to look far away at you or to look at the camera. I've never done this before. We have two separate areas of green screen. Every time I've been interviewed, and I've been interviewed a lot of times, I'm always sitting in front of the person interviewing me. Now, because of this coronavirus issue, we're taking this very, very seriously, and especially in our masjid environment, we're taking super precautionary measures, and so we're not even sitting together, subhanAllah. Two separate screens, and the cameras are pointed in two different places, and our AV staff is merging them together, alhamdulillah. So, alhamdulillah, pleasure to be here, alhamdulillah. It was I have to say that it was a very sad day to give the khutbah that I gave today, to see the masjid the way it was, but I ask Allah for afiyah and salam, and ask Allah Azza wa Jal to lift this waba and this plague as soon as possible, and to allow us to resume. And subhanAllah, we complain about the repetition of life, we complain about the mundane issues, we complain about the parking, about the noise and this and that. Wallahi, I miss all of that. I miss all of that. I want status quo to come back. I want to complain about the crowds and the parking and having issues. I want to complain about, because subhanAllah, we don't even know the blessings of what we take for granted until they're taken away from us. Nasallallahu as-salama wal afiyah. But khair, this isn't a lecture muhadara. You're supposed to ask me questions, Ustad Morad, so go for it. Bismillah.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. So, Shaykh, we have plenty of questions here, alhamdulillah. The first question, interesting one. They want to know the position of Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah and Imam Malik on closing the masajid during time of emergency.
Bismillah ar-Rahman. I've given more detailed talks about the issue of closing the masajid down, and I don't want to go into even more the repetition. The issue of shutting the masjid down proactively, we have to be frank here and say that it is not something that we find by and large in the earliest books. What we do find is that sometimes masajid were shut down because of circumstances, because there was wars or plagues going on. But even then, generally speaking, it was a reactive measure, not a proactive measure. And this is true, that's historically true. The issue though is that we now understand the notion of crowd control, of disease control, the notion of spreading of these viruses in a way that earlier scholars did not. And because of this, across the globe, alhamdulillah, pretty much all of the muftis and all of the scholarly bodies across the globe, now that it has been explained to them, they have proactively shut down any area of congregation, and especially that of masajid. So I think the question really needs to be rephrased, and that is, what would Imam Abu Hanifa have done, and what would Imam Shafi'i have done if they knew what we now know, and if they understood what we now understand based upon their paradigm and their usul and their madhab? And the answer to that, you look at the modern scholars of the various regions of the world, those that follow Imam Shafi'i, Imam Abu Hanifa, Malik, Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal, and alhamdulillah, you find that so many countries around the world, and in a Facebook post 3 days ago, I listed around 10 countries, and every single day more and more countries are being added. Malaysia, which is Shafi'i, and Qatar, and which is Hanbali, Saudi Arabia, which is Hanbali, the Emirates, Jordan, all of these countries, one by one, they're all understanding that this is really going to be problematic if we do not begin crowd control. And these are scholars that have spent their entire lifetimes studying these madhahib. So rather than say, what did those ulama say? My question should be rephrased. It should be, what would they have said? And the response is, we see what they would have said by the scholarly bodies now that are pretty much almost to a person saying we should shut everything down for the time being until we're able to control and manage, and then inshallah ta'ala we'll open up as soon as possible, inshallah ta'ala.
Ahsanallah ilayk, Shaykhna. So obviously الأمور تقدر بقدرها, and the ulama, if they lived in our time, they would have applied the same usul in our time with the current situations that we're in. And situations changes. Alhamdulillah, Islam is very dynamic.
Alhamdulillah.
It's very dynamic. The second question here is, does the person who dies from a plague get the same reward as that of a martyr that dies in battle?
Bismillah. So we discussed the issue of the types of shahada, and I have a lecture on when we did the series of the barzakh, and I mentioned the types of shahada, and by the explicit hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, that the one who passes away in a plague, he passes away the death of a shaheed, and therefore the person who dies in any of these types of scenarios that the Prophet mentioned, he mentioned drowning, he mentioned by fire, he mentioned the disease of the stomach, he mentioned the disease that, or the plague, all of these and others. Whoever dies by these types of things, they will get the status of the shaheed in the akhirah, even though the shaheed still has certain perks and certain privileges that this person might not have, but still overall the daraja will be that of the shaheed. Now, this does not mean that in this world we will treat them like the shaheed. Generally speaking, those who pass away in any of these types of scenarios and circumstances, they will still be shrouded, and the ghusl will be done, and the salah will be done. Whereas for the shaheed, as you should all know, there is no special ghusl, there is no janazah done, because that is a totally different category. But to answer your question, inshaAllah, anyone who passes away in this plague, and we ask Allah to protect ourselves and our loved ones and our families, but anyone who passes away will indeed, inshallah ta'ala, get the death of a shaheed. And by the way, to add on here, I had a Facebook post about this as well 3 days ago. Morad ibn Jabal, Abu Ubaidah Amir ibn Jarrah, and others of the Sahaba, when the plague came to the region of Amawas outside of Syria, that was exactly what they said. They made dua to Allah. They announced that we heard the Prophet ﷺ say that whoever dies, the shaheed, and then they made dua to Allah that, oh Allah, allow me to have a share of this. They wanted to die that type of death, and they indeed did die that type of death, and we consider them to have died the death of a shaheed, even though both Abu Ubaidah and Mu'adh ibn Jabal, they passed away because of the plague. They did not pass away at the hands of the enemy, but their death is considered to be that of the death of a shaheed because of the plague that was taking place at that time. And Allah Azza wa Jalla knows best.
Ahsanallah ilayk, Shaykh. Next question, inshallah, is praying with a face mask. A lot of people, put these face masks, and obviously we have different types of face masks. So, the big bulky ones that prevent the nose from touching the ground. So technically one of the 7 limbs that should be touching the ground won't be touching the ground. Is it permissible to pray with that mask?
So our Prophet ﷺ told us that we worship Allah. Even the Quran, فَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ مَا اسْتَطَعْتُمْ, and in the famous hadith that صَلُّوا قَائِمًا, if pray upstanding, if you cannot do then pray sitting, if you cannot do then pray ala jamb, upon the side. And we are obliged to fulfill the commandments to the best of our capabilities. When anything hinders us from fulfilling the commandments of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then the amount of hindrance that we have will therefore diminish the obligation of fulfilling. And this is something that is applicable in any chapter of Sharia. Given the current circumstances, and given that this virus spreads on surfaces, then if we're able to prevent any type of mechanism. Now, if we're at our homes and houses, then inshallah there's no need to be that precautious because we're surrounded by ourselves. However, if we go out in public, best thing to do is that if you have your own sajjada and you use your own sajjada, then you can be confident that I'm going to now be doing sajda on something that is not going to be any issue or problem. Nonetheless, if you feel there is a need, or if there even beyond this point, if it needs to be done, not just for this coronavirus, but for any issue, if there is an impediment, a medical impediment that causes you to not be able to fulfill an obligation, then the Sharia allows for ease. Remember that this religion is based upon ease and not difficulty. يريد الله بكم اليسر ولا يريد بكم العسر وما جعل عليكم في الدين من حرج. These are very explicit verses. Allah wants to make things easy for you and not make things difficult. Allah has not put any difficulty upon you. And one of the principles of usul al-fiqh and fiqh, these are called the qawa'id, or the rules of fiqh. There's a science of fiqh called usul, there's another science called qawa'id, and then there's fiqh itself. So there's something called qawa'id, or the maxims of fiqh. These are rules that are applicable in any chapter of fiqh. And there are 5 main rules, and one of these rules is the more difficult something becomes, the easier the sharia becomes. This is a rule. The more difficult life becomes, the easier sharia becomes. This is a rule. Now obviously it is only the scholars who will be able to use this rule. It's no problem to teach this rule to the public, they should be aware of it, but obviously you need a shaykh to tell you, otherwise somebody's going to misuse the sharia. But in this case, there is inshallah ta'ala no haraj, no problem if a person is wearing a face mask because they genuinely fear that there might be an issue if they do sajda somewhere, that they then do sajda wearing the face mask, and there is no penalty, nor is there any sajda sahu if they do that, and Allah Azza wa Jalla knows best.
Jazakallah khair, Shaykhna. Next question is, what should we do in Ramadan if the situation continues the way it is right now? Like a lot of the Muslimin today can't imagine a Ramadan without masjid, without lights, without jama'ahs, without taraweeh, without iftar with your brothers and sisters. Obviously it's gonna be a big hit on their spirituality, their iman. Is there any advice that you can offer us if this continues till Ramadan?
So in all likelihood, it does appear that this will continue till Ramadan. Just being realistic, I hope to be proven wrong, and I pray that inshallah tomorrow everything is lifted up, but we also tie our camel. And the way things are progressing, I think it is almost inevitable, if things continue in their natural course, that 5 weeks from now we will still be pretty much under a type of lockdown that will not allow mass congregations of 1,000, 2,000 people in our masajid, nor would it be wise to do so unless something changes dramatically. If that is the case, then we need to find an alternative mechanism to keep our iman strong. Now, I will be the first to say, as somebody who's, for the last 40 plus years of my life, Ramadan has always been associated with community and masjid. There is no Ramadan of my life except that it is associated with the masajid and taraweeh and community. And to be brutally honest, at least 20 of those years of my life, alhamdulillah, the Ramadans have even been associated with Mecca and Medina, and not just anywhere, but actually Mecca and Medina. For so many years of my life, they're associated with that. So the concept of having a Ramadan without the masjid and without community and without the jama'ah of people, it is alien to my cultural upbringing. That having been said, we have to be brave enough to acknowledge the Sahaba did not have Ramadan the ways we have Ramadan. There was no Taraweeh prayer in the time of the Prophet ﷺ. There were no community iftars that we are accustomed to. They would eat at home individually. They didn't have enough surplus food to have massive feasts. So in some ways, perhaps we will have to rediscover the spirit of Ramadan as it really used to be. And now me and you, we are so weak that we needed the community to help us. Let's be honest here. To pray behind a qari of the Quran, to pray behind, in the haram, Shaykh Ali Hudayfi, or Shaykh, when I was growing up, Shaykh Jabir, we used to pray Ali Jabir, in Medina, Shaykh Thubayti, when I was there. Subhanallah, it's a different world, right? And it's just, it takes you places that I don't think I could go alone at home. So we go to the masjid and we're lifted with the community. But the Sahaba themselves, they never prayed Taraweeh, by and large, other than 2 nights as we know. They never prayed Taraweeh in the time of the Prophet ﷺ in community. They would pray Isha, and then they would come home, and then they would pray Qiyamul Layl on their own. So we will have to rediscover the original spirit of Ramadan, and that is simplicity. Guys, let's be honest here. We all want those fancy iftars laid out. Well then, let this be the Ramadan that we have a simple iftar. Let this be the Ramadan we actually actually not gain weight, because we gain weight in most Ramadans. Let this be the Ramadan we will be healthy, all of us. Sit down with the family and say, okay, let's cut back all those samosas. I know you're going to kill me after this, but hey, let's try our best to have a healthy Ramadan. Then tell your families, let's come together, families only, right? Not nobody from outside the house. families only. Every night, let's do something. Let's do a Quran circle. Let's do Isha together, maybe Taraweeh together or Taraweeh separately. But we encourage one another in the households to be able to rediscover the spirit of Ramadan. And again, to be technical, Taraweeh prayer is actually tahajjud prayer. And the best time to do it is not right after Isha. The best time to do it is actually the last third of the night, which is before Fajr. And if Allah wills that we are not going to work and we're working from home at that point in time, and if Allah wills that we're able to transfer a little bit of timings here and there, perhaps some of us can try to revive that spirit of Ramadan where we are praying Taraweeh as actual proper tahajjud and Qiyamul Layl, where we wake up at 3 a.m. and we do Qiyamul Layl and Tahajjud at that time, and then we have an iftar, and then we have to go to work, and then we come back early, meaning work is going to be in our own houses maybe even, then come back early and sleep, and then sleep in the afternoon, as was the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. So in every single disaster and calamity, the believer finds the positives and finds the good. Perhaps in this Ramadan we will rediscover, and believe me, I say this with a smile on my face, and Allah knows I cannot even imagine, because I've never lived it in my life. I've never lived a Ramadan without community and jama'ah and masjid. I've never lived it. This might be the first Ramadan. If it is, then I put my trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that Allah Azza wa Jal will bring us through that Ramadan. He's going to guide us through that Ramadan. He's going to make that Ramadan, maybe even inshallah the best Ramadan we've ever had. And then inshallah we hope next year when we get the community back and when we get the Ramadan and the Jama'ah back, we will then truly appreciate it. Subhanallah, we take things for granted. How we would complain and grumble and moan about the parkings and about the uncle next to you that's belching away after eating that heavy iftar and whatnot, and now we're wanting how we wish we can have that back, and now Allah musta'an. So perhaps we might even appreciate the blessings that we took for granted after this Ramadan, and Allah Azza wa Jal knows best.
Jazakumullah khair, Shaykhna. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guide us through this Ramadan, inshallah, and make us get to Ramadan, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless us with mercy and forgiveness and jama'ah. Ameen ya Rabbil Alameen. Shaykh, some of the young brothers and sisters that have been planning weddings in these times and in the summer times after Ramadan, because nobody plans a wedding during Ramadan, of course. What advice do you give them? Do they go ahead and get married? I've been reading some Twitter messages now that, this is your time to get married, can't have a wedding, no people to invite, right? No honeymoon because there's no travel, so it's just going to be a cheap wedding. What advice do you give people who are planning to get married right now or in the next few months, inshallah?
Firstly, you asked the question, what advice do you give young people planning to get married? I didn't know that marriage only has to be young. There might be middle-aged people getting married. Why this restriction, ya Morad? What I'm saying? What's going on here, akhi? Is you're restricting marriage?
Of course, up to the age of the Prophet ﷺ.
Yes, indeed. So any age, inshallah, is permissible, no problem. Listen, this is a question that is neither fiqh nor aqidah. It is a question of psychology and of logistics. And therefore, there's not much I can say. This is not a legal question. It is not a theological question. It is a question that deals with your own psychological frame of mind and logistically what is going on in the world. And anybody is equally qualified. My opinion is just as good as yours or anybody else's. No fiqh is being brought to the table. And I say this because, again, if you've listened to any of my talks for the last few years, I've always been emphasizing this point that understand the role of a person of knowledge and ask the questions that the person of knowledge can benefit you with. You're asking a question that is an opinion. And I have an opinion, Ustad Morad has an opinion, your parents have an opinion, everybody has an opinion that is equally valid in this particular case. It doesn't necessarily have anything more to do with my knowledge of seerah and tafsir and hadith. It is permissible to have a marriage in these circumstances. There's no fiqh involved here. You do not require a lavish ceremony. What is required, as you all know, is the simple ceremony of ijab and qabul and the two witnesses and the mahar, and all of this is the standard procedure, and this can can be done, obviously, in a very simple manner. And perhaps there is, again, hidden barakah and blessings in this, because as we all know this, nobody ever does it. We all know it. The Prophet's marriages were very simple, very down to earth. There were small amounts of mahr. It was a very simple meal. It wasn't anything, fancy and whatnot. And that's the way it was. So if you have decided, or it was already pre-planned that is going to take place, it's not my position to tell you to postpone or to do it. That's not something that you should be hearing from me. You and your family and your bride or groom and his or her family, you talk this through, discuss it, and decide amongst yourselves that do you want to go ahead with the ceremony? And if so, all I can say from a logistical standpoint, and this is something that I say not because I know Islam any better, but because we all understand the circumstances we're living in, that if you do decide to go ahead, in no circumstance should you hold a feast where a lot of people come together. Just today there was in the news, in the New York Times, of a family gathering in New Jersey where they didn't take this thing seriously, and they invited just 25 people to their family event, and one person had the virus. 7 of them caught it, 3 of them passed away, and that news I think came out today. 3 of them passed away already because they were elderly, and 7 people got it. This is in New Jersey, and you can read it. It's in the New York Times today. I read it myself. So my point is that for sure, without a question, that if you do want to go ahead with this, there should not be even large groups of neighbors and whatnot coming together. Rather, it should be the bare minimum that needs to be done. And then other than this, logistics and whatnot, as I said, is not a fiqhi question per se. But at the same time, we have to be pragmatic. And I don't mean to be dismal or gloomy, but I am somebody who's reading up, and as you are, and it is possible, worst case scenario, that status quo will remain maybe even for a year, maybe even 18 months. There was an article in the Wall Street Journal about this, best case and worst case scenario. Best case scenario, realistically, 2-3 months. Worst case scenario, maybe even 18 months. If it is 18 months, Nasallallahu as-salama wal afiyah, we can't stop living, can we? Right? We cannot. I mean, we cannot delay the things that we need to do. We have to move on with life. And so, if Allah Azza wa Jal wills that we are being tested in this long manner, we're going to have to work within what is going on, and that means we're going to have to get on with life as much as we can, the good and the bad, the positive, the negative, the marriages and the births and maybe even the janazas eventually. That's what life is all about, and we're going to have to cope with it day by day. So again, it is not my place to tell you specifically what to do, but generically speaking, it is something that you and your family and the other party and their family should discuss. Do you wish to delay a few months, or do you want to go on with this? And in whatever you decide, 2 things as our Sharia tells us to do: istikhara and istishara. Our Sharia tells us to do this. And I've given a longer lecture here at Epic. You can find it on the archives. And that is, you pray istikhara to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, whatever you do. 2 rak'ah, and then the dua of istikhara. And then istishara. And istishara means you ask your loved ones, your senior members, people of wisdom and experience, you ask istishara. And based on istikhara and istishara, you then undertake the decision. And once you undertake that decision, you put your trust in Allah and don't look back. فَإِذَا عَزَمْتَ فَتَوَكَّلْ عَلَى اللَّهِ. Once you make up your decision with istikhara and istishara, you go forward and you make the best of the situation. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make it all easy. I have to say one other joke at the end here. I just tweeted this the other day, that one of the brothers who is single now, he tweeted out on his Facebook that I'm offering a very expensive mahr to any bride that wants to come. And it was 3 rolls of toilet paper and 1 hand sanitizer and 1 cleaner and whatnot. He goes, this is my mahr if anybody's going to come. So a sister commented, no, I will accept nothing less than a bidet. I have to get the lota, then I'm going to get married to you, inshallah. So alhamdulillah, let's find some halal humor in all of this as well, inshallah ta'ala. We have to live, and we have to carve out even the laughs through the tears and through the trials and tribulations, and such is life. And we ask Allah for His salam and afiyah. Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. I hope all our future spouses got that documented. Jazakumullah khair for the fatwa, Shaykh.
Alhamdulillah.
It's going to go a long way, inshallah.
Alhamdulillah.
So, along the same lines, so we know that husbands have rights over their wives, and wives have rights over their husbands. Is it permissible in these times for the husband to, or for the wife to refuse to be intimate with her husband because of this corona scare. A lot of times the husband goes out, works, mixes with people, and the wife might be home. And can she refuse to be intimate with the husband, saying, hey, I don't know, you might have corona?
You know, that's a difficult question, jokes aside. I don't feel I'm qualified to answer that because I don't know the level of risk in this regard. And this needs to be asked to a medical expert about how dangerous, because I don't, from what I understand, so again, it goes back to the husband's profession. Every day he's going out meeting other people. From what I understand, most people are under lockdown. From what I understand, most people are working from home. And if that is the case, then obviously there's no more risk on the husband than there's on the wife. And if that is the case, then the default rules will apply, which is that there is no need for this to become an issue. And inshallah, the both of them should work out a healthy marriage and compromise. But if one of the partners is at a higher risk than the other, then there's no doubt that this changes the situation if this risk is transferable. And I'm not a medical expert, and I do not know whether intimacy in and of itself transfers this virus or not. From what I understand, and again, I'm not a medical expert, the virus is transferred by the droplets inside the throat. If coughing or if sneezing occurs, it's not skin by skin touching, as much as it is the droplets that come when a person is sick and they cough or they sneeze. So this is a question that cannot be answered from fiqh alone. It needs the expert advice of the doctors and the specialists, because there is no doubt that if one of the partners is reasonably potentially dangerous in transferring a disease, I'm being generic here, I'm not being specific. If one of the partners is reasonably potentially dangerous, the other partner is not obliged to risk his or her life in this regard. But I do not know whether the situation is that level where a person is going to reasonably be compromised. That's not something that I'm capable of answering. We need to go to the medical experts to do that firstly. Secondly, one also needs to say, well, if mere proximity is going to possibly transfer the disease, and not just intimacy, then what is the point of avoiding intimacy when you're sleeping in the same room, for example, or using the same utensils, for example? So again, your question, and I know it's an awkward question for some, but it needs to be asked, and I also know it's going to cause some people to laugh and joke, but I'm being dead serious here, and I'm using this as a teaching moment for me and for all of you, that this is actually a very, very good question. It's a very serious question, and I'm telling you honestly, I'm not qualified to answer it, because it requires knowledge beyond what is found in the books of fiqh. It requires knowledge of medicine. I need to know many things that I don't know. And dare I say, from what I understand, maybe even medical experts don't know this yet, because this is still being researched. From what I have read, and I'm reading quite a lot about this every single day, but I'm not an expert. From what I have read, medical experts are still uncertain about how this disease actually transfers, how the virus actually lives, how long it lives, and what transfers to what. And so what the Sharia allows us to do is to take reasonable precautions. What is not allowed is unreasonable or bizarre precautions that are going to infringe on the rights of the others. So I need to know how reasonable it is where this disease can be transferred between marital couples. I also need to know that what else is being done. And again, so for example, I give the example, if the doctor were to say, or if the medical expert were to say, it's not the intimacy, it's not the act of the conjugal relation, it is simply being in the vicinity of the other person. And then the wife or the husband are saying, but we're living together. We're sleeping together, we're eating in the same utensils, we're using the same bathroom, using the same kitchen. So they're living everything together. So then the act of intimacy is not going to in and of itself be any more riskier than simply living together. If that is the case, then obviously that changes the dynamics. And we'll say, well then why should then this one act be now become problematic? So bottom line, very good question, Morad. And I'm not able to answer it definitively. I've given you some generic guidelines, and I hope that inshallah we get to know from virus experts and medical experts more about this disease and how it is transferred and whatnot. And once we have a definitive answer on that, then inshallah ta'ala, myself and others, people of knowledge, can then give a more of a definitive answer about this question, and Allah Azza wa Jalla knows best.
Ahsanallah alayk, Shaykhna. See, these marriage questions are always tough, right?
Very tough. But how come we're talking about only marital questions? I'm curious.
Yeah, because we're at home with our families all day. Obviously, so it's something very important, right? So just let me switch it up before it's
very
too late.
good. Alhamdulillah.
So people are circulating this hadith about if Tawaf stops around the Kaaba, then that is a sign that Ya'juj and Ma'juj are going to come, or that is a sign of the hereafter. Is that actually a hadith, or did you ever come across
I am
it?
not aware of any authentic hadith that mentions that one of the signs of the Judgment Day and Ya'juj and Ma'juj coming is that Tawaf will stop around the Kaaba. What we do know from the authentic hadith is that one of the signs of the very end of times where there will be no more Muslims left. So the hadith that I know of is talking about a time which is after that of Isa ibn Maryam, after that of Ya'juj and Ma'juj, after that of Dajjal, at the very end of times. And of course, here at Epic, right before you came, Morad, we had a very long series about the signs of the Day of Judgment. And I went over, I don't know how many episodes on the signs of the Day of Judgment. And in one of them, I went over this issue of one of the last things that will be done when there are no more Muslims on earth, is that the Suwayqatain is going to come and he will destroy the Kaaba, and there will be no one to protect the Kaaba because there will be no more Muslims left. So that is definitely one of the signs of Yawm al-Qiyamah. But the hadith that I'm aware of do not apply before the coming of Ya'juj and Ma'juj, when there are still 1.5 billion Muslims on earth. No, the hadith that I'm aware of, which are the authentic hadith in Bukhari, Muslim and others, is that these hadith are applicable towards the very last batch of humanity on earth. And this is after Dajjal and Isa and the Mahdi and Ya'juj and Ma'juj, and not in that order because they're in different orders. This is the very end of times when the Quran has been lifted up and the kalima has been forgotten and the people no longer worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And our Prophet ﷺ told us that there will come a time when even the doors of Medina will be swinging open and the wolves and the dogs will come in and out of the masjid and no one will care. It's going to be an empty, deserted land. Mecca and Medina will be empty and deserted, not because the Muslims have abandoned, but because there are no more Muslims on earth. That is the sign that I'm aware of. As for what the questioner has asked, I'm not aware of this, and Allah knows best.
Jazakumullah khair, Shaykh. The same subject. So if this continues until Hajj time and we're prevented from doing Hajj, would it be the first time where Hajj is not done in the Haram or not?
There have been multiple times in Islamic history where Hajj has been stopped, for almost always for political reasons. And also there have been times where disease and plagues have been so rampant in certain parts of the world that there could be no caravans that even went for Hajj from those parts of the world. So it would not be the first time that Hajj has been abandoned, but it would probably be the first time in recorded history of our own generations. The Hajj having been abandoned or did not take place, definitely we know multiple times, and from the top of my head I remember now that when the Qaramita, or they called the Karamatians, the Qaramita, when they were a terroristic group in 350 Hijrah, around 350 Hijrah, they were a terroristic group that attacked the Kaaba. Can you believe? This is 1,000 years ago. They attacked the Kaaba and they, believe it or not, stole the Hajar Aswad, the black stone, and they massacred the Hujjaj during Hajj. During Hajj, the Hujjaj fled helter-skelter, and the Qaramita massacred the Hujjaj and they filled the well of Zamzam with their dead bodies. This happened in our own history. Go read this up. It's a very very sad tragedy. And for the next year after that, there was this obviously complete terror of even trying to do the Hajj. So most people did not go for Hajj. And there were other times as well when the Black Plague swept through the world, that there was just no money and no resources for the ummah en masse to do Hajj. Perhaps a few locals and whatnot. It's not as if Hajj, even if they shut it down, there's still going to be the locals that do Hajj. Alhamdulillah, there's going to be some people do it. We're not going to maybe have millions of people, but still you're going to have the very small groups. In Mecca, there are going to be people that will just go to the Kaaba and then go to Arafat, and Hajj will take place inshallah this year. The question is, will 2 million people or 3 million people come to do the Hajj? And if that is not going to happen, then it won't be the first time where the Hujjaj have significantly become much less. And in fact, as I said, there were times when there were no Hajj caravans going because of either political reasons or because of plagues. These are the two main issues that have prevented people from going for Hajj. It won't be the first time, but perhaps it will be the most dramatic time, because now we have 3 million people coming, and for that to just dwindle down, it will be a very, very sad tragedy. And again, going back to my khutbah today, we really should introspect. We really should think long and hard about why this is happening, because there is no question that this is a type of collective punishment, even if maybe each and every one of us does not deserve the punishment, but collectively it is really, there is no way around this, that the blessings of coming to the masjid and of going to the haramain, they have been lifted from us for a time being. And we have to ask ourselves why that is the case, and this is a time for introspection. It is very possible that Hajj will be severely diminished. It is very possible. We have to think about that psychologically. Maybe even cancelled, but that's up to the authorities after Allah's will, obviously. I personally do not think that they will cancel the Hajj, but I do think that if situation continues, that they will take drastic measures to diminish the quantities of people coming. And from a Shari'i perspective, and again, and I'm saying this as somebody who's leading a Hajj group, so I don't like to say this, but that is different than the Shari'i perspective. From a Shari'i perspective, if a person genuinely feels, now it's still too early to do anything, but if two months before Hajj, a month before Hajj, if status quo remains and a person feels that it is not safe to go, they have every right to delay, even if Hajj is obligatory on them, because Allah Azza wa Jal explicitly says in the Quran that Hajj is only obligatory لِمَنِ اسْتَطَاعَ إِلَيْهِ سَبِيلًا, who has a way to go, right? Who is able to go. And given the legitimate fear of the coronavirus and the fact that Hajj is in congregated quarters and everything, if a person feels that status quo still remains, then they feel worried, it is an Islamic excuse to delay the Hajj to a year where this is not happening, and they would not be sinful. Even though, generally speaking, Hajj is obligatory as soon as you can afford it and you're able to go. But this is one of the reasons why we'd say that it is permissible to delay. But still, I need to stress, it's still too early to make a decision. We still are 3.5 months away from Hajj. So let's wait, inshallah. We never know, because things might change within a month. Things might change. In Ramadan, they might change. In the summer, there is a good possibility that things might change in the summer, even by the weather, by the way. If you know what's going on again with the virus issues, that there is a prediction that simply because of hot weather as well, that the virus will diminish exceedingly so. And if that is the case, then inshallah, that also has a bearing on Hajj, and Allah knows best.
Jazakumullah khair, Shaykh. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala never deprive us of His house and visiting it and doing Hajj. We have a bunch of questions. We're not going to have time because we only have 10 minutes. So Shaykh, a very important question. Huquq al-ibad is something very important and emphasized in the deen, right? Especially our neighbors, our family, our parents, our cousins, relatives in general. We have to reach out to them. And in these times, it's very difficult to do this. And sometimes, if someone's parent is living not too far, it's very, if it's a large household, it's very difficult not to go and visit the parents, for example, with all the grandkids and whatnot, and have these gatherings once a week. Do you think these gatherings should still continue, or should they be on halt as well?
Jayyid. So once again, you're asking a question that deals with a little bit of fiqh and a little bit of medical stuff. My issue is the fiqh stuff, not the medical stuff. From a fiqhi perspective, your job is to make sure that you take care of your loved ones and parents in a reasonable fashion. It is not obligatory. On the contrary, if you're going to endanger them by walking into their house, then the Sharia says don't walk into their house. You can fulfill the obligation in other mechanisms. Alhamdulillah, we thank Allah Azza wa Jal that we have the technology to FaceTime our relatives and parents. We have the technology to talk to them face to face. You know, I mean, every one of us that's above the age of 30 remembers the time when there was no cell phones even, you know, above the age of 40, 50, where, you know, we had to call with the dial tone and whatnot. Things have changed so much. You know, one of the weird things is that even the internet and YouTube and all of this, we thank Allah now, there's so much benefit that there's ilm and knowledge and Quran and we can do stuff. I mean, those of us that remember the 90s and before that the 80s, I mean, what would we have done without the internet? You know, we're seeing each other live right now because of all of this, right? You're watching me from YouTube on live and this is going to be put on YouTube. And imagine if this had happened when we didn't have any of this technology, you know, it would have been a very different world and it would have been a very different time. So bottom line, you're asking me what needs to be done, and I'm saying that whatever the medical experts tell us, we have to make our fiqh around that. Fiqh tells us, our theology tells us, take care of your relatives. Allah didn't tell us how. When the doctors come and they tell us, if you physically visit your elderly father or mother, I'm just saying if they say that, that's, you have to ask your own local doctors. If you're visiting them is going to endanger them, then don't visit them. Call them up, speak to them in other ways, deliver the groceries outside their house. You need to work within what we know of the system. The religion of Islam is not a religion that is anti-common sense and anti-medicine and anti-experience. The religion of Islam works with what we know. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created the world and He revealed the religion. The two go hand in hand. So when doctors tell us, and I know of families that their parents live separate and they're away from, you know, other people, so they have been told they should not visit their parents because their parents live separate from everybody else. So I have friends, they're dropping their groceries to their parents outside the door and they're saying salam from the window to their mother, and it's breaking their hearts that they can't even do that. That's in their scenario. But what if your parents are living with you anyway in the house? Then that's a different story altogether. So each family is different, and again, my job is not to answer specifics. My job is to give generically based upon what our religion says. And what our religion says, we are required to take care of our parents. Sometimes, if we visit them, might even endanger them, we will not be taking care of them if we walk into their house and after having been in public and whatnot, and they're not living with us. So you take into account your situation, the situation of your parents, and do the best that you can given that circumstance. And no matter what the circumstances, definitely now is the time to reconnect with any relatives or any people that you were not talking to. You know, Allah knows what's going on. You know, call up your aunts, your uncles, your cousins, call up your family, be in touch with them. We all have issues with various family members. This is the sunnah of Allah in His creation. You know, now is the time to cleanse your heart. Now is the time to just get rid of any baggage that was there. Allah knows who amongst us will live through this and who won't. Allah knows what's going to happen. Use this as an excuse to soften your heart, and inshallah the heart of your relatives will also be softened. So work in this time frame to try to re-establish that connection online. There's no problem making a phone call, alhamdulillah. You know, call them up, send them an email, see what's going on, be in touch with family and loved ones with whatever way you can, given the circumstances that are happening, you know, and Allah Azza wa Jalla knows best.
Ahsanallah alayk. So Shaykh, now we have a new trend that we're seeing ever since the masajid closed, and a lot of the big Islamic centers adapted the position to close the masajid out of precaution. Some masajid have gatherings outside in their parking lots for the 5 daily prayers. And obviously it's gaining more and more popularity. People are saying, okay, there's a Jama'ah outside, maybe we could come and join. Would you recommend this? Obviously they're coming at their own risk. They're bringing their prayer rugs and whatnot, and it's kind of awkward, you know, to see them praying outside of the masjid when the masjid can be easily opened, but obviously, So it's kind of contradicting. If they're meeting in groups larger than 50 or larger than 100, whatever the CDC said, we can't meet in groups more than 10 right now. So, or they don't recommend it at least. So if they're meeting in these large groups outside of masajid, what is your position towards that? What advice do you give them?
So one thing we need to realize, and again, I'm speaking here with not just the fiqh basis, but also knowing what we know about the virus and whatnot. When the CDC is saying that they are not recommending any groups larger than 10, we need to understand 10 is not a magic number, such that when you have 9, it becomes safe. And when you have 11, it becomes dangerous. What the CDC is trying to do is to minimize the casualties, if there are casualties. We need to understand the goal of the CDC. Of course, the CDC is the Center for Disease Control, right? And it is the national reputable organization that our government it's a branch of our government that is telling us these regulations and guidelines. And we as Muslims need to be intelligent enough to understand that what they're saying is, what they're trying to do, if a person has the virus, then instead of that person walking into a room of 200 people and causing 200 casualties, let's minimize by causing only 10 casualties. That's what they're trying to do. Me personally, I am trying to avoid every single person. And I want everybody to do the same. I walked into the masjid, we have the AV, we have the security, we have you, Morad. You can all testify. I wasn't within 3 feet of you. I didn't shake any of your hands. I'm not within any vicinity of anyone. For Jumu'ah today, one of the shuyukhs came, and again, it's human nature. He walks up to me, he puts his hand out. Wallahi, it broke my heart. I pulled my hand back and I laughed. I said, Shaykh Sahib, you're forgetting, you're not supposed to be doing this. It hurts my heart. But this is what I'm doing as a precautionary measure, because I'm a person who reads and understands, what is going on. I'm not a biology expert, but at the same time, I'm not jahid about science. We know what this is. Read up how dangerous it is, how this disease is transferred. All you need to do is to have that droplet, come over to you and then touch your body and whatnot. We take reasonable precautions. And me personally, and I'll say this not as Shaykh Yasir, but as Yasir, your brother, I say it is foolish. I say it is foolish to come and mix in gatherings of 5-10 people for no reason. You do what you need to do as the bare minimum. You need to go shopping for your family, okay, you go shopping for your family, you need to go. But even when you go, be careful, don't touch people, wash your hands when you come back. Do the bare minimum. If your work is requiring you to go whatever place you need to, then take reasonable precautions and do that. But don't go socializing. I'm bored as well. I'd like to go visit people's houses. We want to have people over. That is utterly foolish to do. I'm speaking again as your brother in humanity, not as a person of any ilm, just as another person who is reading up and understand what's going on. This is no joke, my dear brothers and sisters. This is no joke. This is a virus that is spreading at an exponential level. We honestly have never experienced a plague in our lives. Our predecessors would live through a few plagues. They knew the terror. They knew what happens. We are living a lackadaisical, cut off from reality. We don't understand. We really have a cockiness and an arrogance that is truly terrifying. And that is going to harm all of us. You know what my problem is? And again, for the last few days on Twitter and Facebook, I'm being attacked harshly by people who are irritated that I'm going against their mashayikh and I'm saying we should not have Jumu'ah, and their mashayikh say we should, and so they're saying that you're disrespecting our mashayikh because I'm saying that their mashayikh are wrong in this regard, and they are wrong. It doesn't matter what I say or not, they are wrong in having the position that people should have Jumu'ah. My issue is, those people that are congregating and they're still doing Jumu'ah, it's hurtful that they're going to harm themselves, but I'll be honest here. What is really painful to me is that their foolishness, and dare I say their stupidity, is going to harm the entire city, not just them. It's not just them that are going to be harmed. It's not just their families. If you understand the spread of the virus being exponential, if you understand that every person that is sick is going to spread it to maybe 10, 15, 20 people, and you do the math, and then you realize that that person is within our own Muslim community, England, the British government said the Muslim community is the #1 casualty of the coronavirus. It is the Muslim community that's going to suffer the most. This is what the government said. Do you want to know why? I will tell you why. Because we have, mashallah, the largest gatherings. We have, mashallah, the most extended families. We thank Allah. Alhamdulillah, we thank Allah. Outside of this plague, we thank Allah that our masajid are packed. We thank Allah that we love our families. We thank Allah that we have love and care. But those issues are breeding grounds for the viruses. Coming together and congregating and hugging and shaking. The government, the British government is saying the #1 community that is going to be affected is the Muslim community of England. That's what they said, and they're absolutely spot on, because they understand that our culture, being as friendly and as loving as whatnot it is going to cause these issues. So I have to be honest here. I'm not in charge of this issue of whatnot. If I were in charge, this is private property and I would ban it. Simple as that. I don't care. I said this on Twitter. Get angry at me. Just don't mix with people. Curse me if you want. Just don't mix with people. Just stay at home. Don't go for Jumu'ah and Jama'ah. Be individual. As much as you want to say, I'm this, I'm that, go ahead. Let your anger out. I want to save lives. I want to save the ummah. I want to save people from getting this disease. And what I am telling you to do is the #1 mechanism after putting our trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that will save us, and that is social isolation. Do not mix with people. Do not spread people. And dear Muslims, don't you read that up to 60%, maybe even 80% of the people who get this virus, alhamdulillah, they will not even be affected. But what will they do? They will carry the virus to their children, to their spouses, to their parents. They're going to carry it to their loved ones. They will be the mechanism. Today I got a text message from one of my own students that is in Canada on a life support now. 25-year-old man, but he has obviously some other complications. 90% of his lungs is gone. 90% is gone. And 10% remaining, the doctors don't know is he going to live or not. And a person of our community, right? He had some minor issue before. I mean, generally speaking, in the 20s and 30s, if you're young, generally speaking, you will overcome. But if there's anything that you had a pre-existing condition, any type of, asthma or whatnot, it is very possible that this virus can come and take it to a whole different level. So, dear Muslims, don't be foolish. Don't act in a manner that is going to cause your own destruction or the destruction of your loved ones. Mixing with other human beings at a close proximity, this is the #1 cause of the spread of the virus. Therefore, stay away from people, have a healthy distance, and it doesn't make sense for you to be coming to the masjid and interacting with people. And now that we've shut the masajid, what are some people doing? Alhamdulillah, it's not in our community, but in other communities I know, they're going to be praying in the parking lot, I've heard. I've been told that they're going outside and standing outside the door and having mini jama'at as a type of anger that the masjid shut down, I don't care, I'm still going to pray here. And we have to deal with this. Frankly, it is foolishness. It really is foolishness, and allow me to say it because it is true. It's an arrogance, that this assumption that if we do this, then Allah is going to be happy with us. And Allah is not happy with foolishness. I know our time is up, but I said this hadith before, I'm going to say it again. And then inshallah, I guess with this we conclude. The famous hadith was in Abu Dawood, where this same attitude was found amongst a companion when his companion friend fell sick, or that he had a head injury, the blood was coming from his head and it's gushing out, and he had to do ghusl. And he asked his companion, what should I do? Do I have to do ghusl or not? And this bleeding and it's festered. You're supposed to keep it dry. It's a middle of the desert. There's no medication, nothing. And his companion said to him that, oh, if you have to do ghusl, I don't see any concession. Allah has made it obligatory. You have to do ghusl. Go jump into the river. The guy jumped in, the well that was there. He jumped in and his festered wound became much worse and he passed away and he died. When they got back to the Medina, the Prophet ﷺ got so angry at this person, he actually uttered a curse. He said, قَتَلُوهُ قَاتَلَهُ اللَّهُ. This man killed him. May Allah curse him. This is in the hadith in Abu Dawood. Your ignorance and your stupidity and your foolishness by thinking that the Sharia does not allow for any laxity. If he has to jump in and do ghusl, go ahead and do ghusl. You didn't know fiqh, which is why we see the difference between the real ulama, the fuqaha, the ulama rabbaniyun. Look at the councils of Saudi Arabia, of Kuwait, of United Arab Emirates, of Morocco, of Turkey, of Malaysia. All of these councils with ulama that have spent not 20, 30 years like I have, 40, 50, 60 years of their lives studying fiqh. all of them unanimously saying, let us shut the masajid down. Now we have some young man or some uncle who's never studied Islam except for a khutbah or two, and he or she thinks they know Islam better than these great ulama, and they want to show that they know Islam. Ya akhi, then you're not just going to cause problems to yourself, you're going to cause problems to your family and your community and to all of us. And that is why I keep on telling you, oh people, if you have someone in your family that wants to do this, let them get angry at you. If you're able to physically stop them and tell them, do not go, stay at home, don't do this, then go ahead and do that. Because this foolishness of walking around and being with the public, and you know, there was on NBC or was it or ABC, whatever, these young college kids in Florida, they're going to the spring break, right? And they're being interviewed, and they're saying, I don't care if the coronavirus comes. And today there was an article or a thing that one of them went back home, fell sick, is on the ventilator, and now he is saying, you know, that please listen to me, don't act foolishly. You know, I can't breathe. I'd give my eyes to be able to breathe now. I'll give my eyesight up so I can have a full breath, because he cannot breathe now. This is stupidity. And I'm sorry to be so blunt here. Those people that are wanting to pray in the masjid, they're just as foolish as those teenagers that want to go to spring break in Florida and thinking nothing is going to happen. It's the same mentality. I don't care, I'm going to do it. Our sharia is not asking us to be foolish. We tie our camel and then we put our trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And intermixing with the public is not tying our camel, it is acting foolish. And that is as blunt as I can be. And if you want to get angry, please get angry at me, but stay at home. That's my advice to you.
جزاكم الله خير شيخنا, الله يبارك فيك يا رب وأحسن الله إليك. Very thorough answer, alhamdulillah rabbil alameen. I think it got to everyone. And I'd just like to testify that wallahi Shaykh Yasir is the most cautious one in here. Yani he's taking the most precautions, mashallah. He's very keen on having us keep the distance away, not shake hands, and we keep washing our hands. He keeps reminding us. Allah barik fi Shaykh. Yani, and he's taking these measures more than anyone I've seen in the community. So that's for that. And that Shaykh, what you just said is what distinguishes a scholar from a layman. Yeah, the scholar sees a fitna before it happens, and the layman sees it when he's in it, or when she's in it. We call all the audience today, inshallah, to listen to the advice of our scholars, to these lijan, to these councils. They're not speaking from nothing, they have a lot of knowledge, and when they tell you that it's better to stay home, then it's better to stay home. Take their advice, brothers and sisters in Islam, because it indeed is a serious matter, wallah. We might not see it, but they see it because they see something we don't see to begin with. Barakallahu feekum. I'd just like to remind you with two things, inshallah. Please subscribe in our channel to help Epic Masjid so we can continue to provide you with this content. Jazakumullah khair. And if you cannot subscribe, which I think you can all subscribe inshallah ta'ala, please share this video with others, and do not forget us in your donations. We really need your donations. These are tough times for the masajid inshallah, and as you see, these donations are coming a long way. We're providing you with so much inshallah, and the weeks that are coming are going to show you how much we're preparing for this community. Please do not forget us in your donations. Jazakumullah khair. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
لا يزال الخير حيا لا يزال إن في الدنيا سلاما وظلال أخبر الأيام أنها في وصال قم بنا وانظر لآيات الجمال قم بنا وانظر لآيات الجمال